Okay, YouTube. This is a video on Kant's solution to the problem of induction. Um, I might have to split this one over a few videos because this is the more I think about this, the more unwieldy the material becomes, and the harder it is for me to distill it in a simple way. But I'm going to try. So Kant recognizes that there's a chink in Hume's armor. He recognizes that there's something lacking in Hume, and this becomes the genesis of Kant's philosophy. For Hume, the mind is like a Tempur-Pedic mattress in the commercials, right? If you recall the commercials, there's always the image of somebody putting their hand and pushing into the Tempur-Pedic mattress, and then they pull away and the handprint is still there, right? The mattress there is Hume's conception of the mind. The mind is something that our sense perceptions impress themselves upon. So what this means is that our mind is passive, right? It's a passive thing that our sense data impresses itself upon. Well, Kant says, what if that's not a good picture of mind, right? What if the mind does things? What if the mind is an active participant in forming a picture of reality, right? Which probably just sounds really conservative and not that crazy to us here and now, but this is a big deal in that time. What if the mind does things, right? He calls this the Copernican turn. He says, we as philosophers have always assumed that the mind conforms to objects. Let us here assume that objects conform to mind, right? So what he's I want to say what he's not saying is that reality is an illusion, or it's all something. It's not an anti-realist position. It's not a position that's like there is nothing out there. But just what if our brain processes our sense perceptions? Well, what would that mean? Well, what this means basically is that instead of sense data impressing itself on our passive minds, what if our brain collects sense data from the world and then organizes it to form a picture of the world, right? What if that picture then is what we experience? Okay? So the idea is we don't experience the world directly, but rather our experiences of the world are mediated by a certain activity of mind, a certain faculty, right? So what's the upshot of that perspective? Just to begin, what does that mean? Well, what it means is that I experience, say, my coffee cup, right? I taste my coffee. I have these direct experiences of things in the world, right? But all of those experiences are mediated by my mind. So if I were to take my mind out of the picture, right, or let's say take all minds out of the picture, what would the coffee cup look like? What would it taste? What would the coffee cup be? in the absence of minds? And Kant's answer is, I don't know. And furthermore, you don't know. None of us knows, right? Nobody can know what objects in the world would be in the absence of minds, because the mind does something, right? So he makes this distinction, and this distinction becomes really, really important. He makes the distinction between the phenomena, which is the coffee cup for me, and the noumena, which is the coffee cup in and of itself, that is, in the absence of minds, right? So there are these two levels to Kant's philosophy: that which is with mind and that which is without mind. This is a bit like the old classical distinction between appearance and essence, right? But for Kant, appearance isn't a mere illusion, right? And the project isn't to get at essence. That's impossible. We can't make statements about the coffee cup, the noumenal coffee cup, the coffee cup without mind. We can't make statements about that, because how could we? How could we have any experience of the coffee cup without experience, right? It's a contradiction. It doesn't make sense. So everything that we do then in science and mathematics and in talking about the world and engaging with the world, we're engaging with phenomena. We're engaging with the appearance of the world. And that's not a bad thing. That doesn't mean to downgrade in some way that interaction. It doesn't mean to downgrade our knowledge. But what it means is that we can't therefore take our phenomenal impressions, our experience of objects, and impose them onto objects without our minds, right? Let me see if I can just give an example, because he takes this really far. But I think that this is, I just want to make an aside, I think that this is pretty, not that controversial in a certain way. If you think about, even in the God Delusion, Richard Dawkins has a chapter about how we don't directly experience the world, but rather our mind creates a picture of the world that we then interact with. And he has this whole thing about optical illusions and stuff, and like this stuff, the ideas that Kant is working with so far, as I've presented them, I don't think are that crazy, right? Our mind does something, it's active. But then that next step of, if our mind does something, then we cannot apply our perception of something to the thing in itself. That's the hard part, I think, for a lot of people to swallow. And it gets even harder, it gets even crazier, right? So philosophy then for Kant is not the attempt to get at what the coffee cup, quote-unquote, really is. That's not what it is. It is to figure out the conditions of possibility for the coffee cup appearing. That is, what has to have always already happened for me to experience the coffee cup, right? What is my mind doing to the coffee cup? That's philosophy for Kant. That's metaphysics for Kant. And this is what pure reason really is for Kant. It's this mind doing stuff. So what does the mind do? Well, one way that he gets at this is he thinks for a long time, and he realizes that I can't think of an object that doesn't occupy space and time. I can't think through it, right? Like I can put the words together, spaceless, timeless, or something, but I can't actually imagine that, right? And I agree. I agree that the human mind cannot do this. That is, space and time are conditions of possibility of the world, of interacting with the world. They're conditions of possibility of the coffee cup appearing to me at all, or me making sense of the coffee cup. So, what Kant wants to say is that space and time are parts of our mind, whatever else they are. They're in our mind, right? Like, we can't think without them. We can't cognize without space and time, or without some notion of space and time. So, how does this solve Hume's problem, right? How then can Kant say that space and time are absolute, right? Well, it becomes a bit like a guy walking around with green sunglasses, right? And he says, everything in the world is green, right? How does he know that? Because he has fucking green lenses over his eyes, right? It's the greenness is a part of the subject, not part of the object, not part of the world, right? So everywhere he looks, he will see green. In the same way, everywhere we look, we will see space and time, right? It doesn't matter, or at least this might be on shaky grounds in a Kantian sense, but let's say it doesn't matter whether or not space and time exist in the world, because one place that we know they exist is in our mind. So everywhere we look, we will see space and time. So then we end up with this question of, does that imply that space and time don't actually exist in the world? Maybe. Maybe not. But he does say something interesting. He does say, I can't imagine an atemporal being. I can't imagine a spaceless being. I can't imagine these things. But does that mean that they don't exist? Of course not. They might well exist. But I can say with certainty that I'll never encounter them. Right? I can say with certainty that my perception of space and time is absolute. There will never, ever, ever be a time where I'm walking down the street and, space ceases to exist or something. No, it's always there. But the only way I can guarantee that it's always there is if it's a part of my mind, like the green sunglasses guy, right? So that's Kant's big insight, basically, is that the mind does things. It's not, and it has effects on how we view the world. And if that's the case, then since we can never, ever step outside of our minds to look at the world from a purely objective point of view, since we can never step outside of mind, then we can't talk about the world in and of itself. We can only talk about the appearance of the world. And that's not a bad thing. Appearance, again, is not downgraded here. That's just how we do things, right? But what I really want to emphasize is that there's this surplus of reality, the noumenal, if you will, and in that distinction between the phenomenal and the noumenal. This is also, as a side note, he solves Hume's problem of causality. It's by saying that causality is in the mind. We look at the cue ball move, we look at the 8-ball move, and our mind organizes these events in such a way that it appears that the cue ball makes the 8-ball move, right? That's what causality is for Kant. So another upside of this is that our appearance of the world is rational and reasonable. Our appearance of the world is something that can be thought through. It's these things that the mind are doing to the world is the condition of possibility of any kind of discourse, of any kind of, again, science, mathematics, anything like this. You can't do these things unless you have some basic, from the get-go, assumptions, like like space exists, time exists, and all of this, right? You actually can't get to, you can't get to the things in and of themselves. That's the dividing line for Kant. Things as they appear to us, and things as they exist in and of themselves. The phenomenal and the noumenal, right? So again, exactly how that works, exactly what Kant thinks the mind does, is laid out in extreme detail in the Critique of Pure Reason. But what's important for our sake is just to note that the mind does something. Just to know that the mind is an active thing. And then once you say that, then you can't say what anything is in the absence of minds. Again, notice that nowhere are we arguing that we're all in a dream. Nowhere are we arguing that the real world doesn't exist. This is just about how the mind interacts with the real world. And yeah, so comment, subscribe. If you don't get it, or if you don't get what I said, please leave a comment, and maybe I'll make another video if enough people don't understand it. I'm not sure how well I articulated the point in the 17 minutes that I've been talking, but hopefully I've done an alright job. And if I have done an alright job, then I'll move on to Kant's Christianity and his argument, or his defense of Christianity. So thank you, and have a good day.